Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're re-journeying back in time to one of the most grueling and defining chapters of World War II in the Pacific, the Battle of Bataan. This wasn't just a single clash, but a 3-month siege of endurance, courage, and immense sacrifice that tested the human spirit to its absolute limit. So, grab a seat, and let's uncover the story of the heroes of Bataan. Our story begins in the dark days following December 7, 1941. Just 10 hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Empire of Japan launched its invasion of the Philippines, then a U.S. Commonwealth. The plan was swift and brutal. General Douglas MacArthur, commanding the United States Army Forces in the Far East, or USAFFE, faced a dire situation. His forces, a mix of American soldiers and a much larger, but less equipped, Filipino army, were spread thin. The initial Japanese landings were overwhelmingly successful. Faced with a technologically superior and battle-hardened enemy, MacArthur made a critical decision. By early January 1942, roughly 80,000 Filipino and American troops had consolidated on Bataan. They were joined by about 26,000 civilian refugees, all crammed into a small, unforgiving piece of land. The peninsula became a fortress, but also a trap. The Japanese, under the command of General Masaru Haruhama, expected a quick victory. They launched their first major offensive on January 9th. The defenders, fighting from prepared positions, put up a ferocious resistance. The Filipino soldiers, defending their homeland, fought with incredible bravery, often repelling Japanese assaults with sheer determination. The initial Japanese attacks faltered against the stubborn defense lines. The terrain was a nightmare for the attackers: dense jungle, steep ravines, and malarial swamps. For weeks, the fighting was a brutal slog. The defenders held their ground, inflicting heavy casualties on the Japanese 14th Army. General Hama was shocked. He had severely underestimated the will of the Phil-American forces. By the end of January, the Japanese offensive had stalled, and they were forced to pull back and regroup. This was a significant, albeit temporary, victory for the Allies. It was a moment of pride, a testament to their grit. They had stopped the seemingly invincible Japanese army in its tracks. But this victory came at a terrible cost, and a new, more insidious enemy was beginning to take its toll: starvation and disease. The hasty retreat to Bataan meant that only a fraction of the necessary supplies made it onto the peninsula. Planners had estimated they needed food for 100,000 people for 6 months. In reality, they had enough for about a month. Rations were cut, and then cut again. The daily intake for a soldier dropped to a mere 1,000 calories, then to 500, a quarter of what they needed. The battling bastards of Bataan, as they grimly called themselves, became resourceful. They ate whatever they could find: mules, carabao, monkeys, iguanas, and even snakes became part of their diet. The lack of food weakened their bodies, making them susceptible to the diseases that thrived in the jungle environment. Malaria, dysentery, beriberi, and scurvy ran rampant. Quinine, the medicine for malaria, quickly ran out. The makeshift hospitals were overflowing with sick and dying men. They were fighting 2 wars, one against the Japanese, and another against their own failing bodies, yet they held on. Their mantra became no mama, no papa, no Uncle Sam. They felt abandoned, but their spirit, though battered, was not yet broken. They clung to the hope that help was on its way. Back in the United States, Bataan became a symbol of American resistance. President Roosevelt's radio broadcasts spoke of their heroism, promising that help was coming. "The eyes of America and the world are upon you," he declared. But in reality, the strategic situation was impossible. The US Navy was crippled after Pearl Harbor, and the war effort was focused on Europe first. There would be no relief convoy. The defenders of Bataan and Corregidor were on their own. By late March, the Japanese were ready to strike again. General Harmer had been heavily reinforced with fresh troops and artillery. On April 3, 1942, they unleashed a massive, final offensive, a relentless artillery bombardment, the likes of which had never been seen in the Philippines, pounded the Phil-American lines 4 hours. This was followed by a coordinated assault of tanks and infantry. The defenders, emaciated and weakened by months of starvation and sickness, were in no condition to resist such a force. Their bodies were failing them. Many were too sick to even lift their rifles. The lines, which had held for so long, finally crumbled. The organization and discipline that had defined their defense dissolved into chaos. Pockets of men fought on bravely, but it was hopeless. The battle was lost. On April 9, 1942, Major General Edward P. King Jr., the commander of the forces on Bataan, made the agonizing decision to surrender. He did so to prevent the further slaughter of his men, who were too sick and starved to fight or even retreat. Over 75,000 Filipino and American soldiers laid down their arms, marking the largest surrender in American military history. But the surrender was not the end of their suffering. In fact, it was the beginning of one of the worst atrocities of the war, the Bataan Death March. The Japanese military, unprepared for such a large number of prisoners and contemptuous of those who surrendered, forced their captives on a brutal 65-mile march to prison camps. Under the scorching tropical sun, with little to no food or water, the men were subjected to unspeakable cruelty. Anyone who fell behind, collapsed from exhaustion, or tried to get water was bayoneted, shot, or beaten to death. The guards took sadistic pleasure in tormenting their prisoners. Thousands perished on this horrific journey. It was a testament to the depths of human cruelty, but also to the endurance of those who survived, helping their comrades along the way. The Battle of Bataan was a military defeat, but it was not a failure of spirit. For 3 crucial months, the defenders of Bataan held up the Japanese timetable for conquest in the Pacific. Their heroic stand bought precious time for the Allies, particularly for Australia, to bolster its defences. They defied the odds and fought with a courage that inspired the free world. Their sacrifice became a rallying cry for the remainder of the war, fueling the determination to achieve ultimate victory and liberate the Philippines, a promise General MacArthur would fulfill 2.5 years later. Today, we remember the Filipino and American soldiers who fought side by side on that desperate peninsula. We honor their resilience, their brotherhood, and their ultimate sacrifice. Their story is a powerful reminder of the cost of freedom and the incredible strength of the human will in the face of unimaginable adversity. Thank you so much for joining me to learn about this critical chapter of history. If you found this story moving or informative, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the past. Let me know in the comments what piece of history you'd like to explore next. Until then, stay curious.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Short Story TV PH. Hit the notification bell so you never miss another tale. Until next time, keep your imagination alive and your stories close.